Matthew 26, verses 57 through 68 this morning. There was a lawyer named Smith, and he was a dishonest lawyer. And he had a trial that was coming up for murder, and he just didn't feel real good about it. He was really holding on, wanted his client to get a manslaughter verdict, and the jury was out for days. And he waited, and one day, about the second day that the jury was out, man came out and he just kind of called him. He said, "Come over here." And he offered him a big bunch of money if he would convince all the jurors to vote for manslaughter instead of murder. And so he promised him that big bunch of money, and the jury goes in and they deliberate for like another week, and then they deliberate for another few days. And finally, the jury comes back, and the defense lawyer's sitting there, and he's so worried, and the jury says, "We find the defendant guilty of manslaughter." And he was like, "Yes, that was great." And so he goes up, and he finds that juror a little bit later on, and he hands him the money, and he says, "Boy, it must have been hard in there convincing everybody to go your way, because y'all were in there for a long time." And the juror said, "You bet it was hard to convince everybody to go with manslaughter. They all kept voting not guilty." Last week, we saw Jesus pray for his disciples and for all those, including us, who would believe. Not long after that prayer, he was arrested. He went through multiple legal proceedings, but we're going to focus on this first trial here. It was a Kangaroo Court trial. A Kangaroo Court is a court, and I put that word court in quotation marks because it's not really a court, but a kangaroo court is a court that ignores recognized standards of law or justice. A kangaroo court may ignore due process, come to a predetermined conclusion. In a lot of countries, they'll call them kangaroo courts. And a lot of times the kangaroo courts are in banana republics. Have you ever heard that phrase before? And so they'll go, and it's basically just a sham, that the whole thing's a sham, that they've already decided what the outcome is before the trial even starts. Well, here, the Sanhedrin, which was the religious ruling body, had a predetermined conclusion, and it was this: Jesus is upsetting our power structure, so he needs to die. And that was it. And they were going to do whatever it took to kill Jesus. This trial violated all kinds of rules. First, it happened at night. Trials in the Sanhedrin, by law, were supposed to occur in the day. We would think it was weird now, wouldn't we? If somebody was put on trial at midnight in the middle of dark, right? Why would you do that? Because you want to hide something. Also, number two, it was decided quickly. Capital trials were required by law to not be decided in a single day. But what did they do? It wasn't even a few hours, and they had determined that Jesus was worthy of death. And number three, you'll see that they sought false testimony. Everybody knows that's wrong. Anybody remember one of the 10 Commandments? You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. What more false witness can you have than to go into court and to lie about your neighbor so that they're punished? Jesus ends up beaten, bruised, battered, and mocked for doing one thing: telling the truth. We see here what I believe to be one of the strongest statements in Matthew concerning the deity of Jesus. That's to say that Jesus was God in the flesh. He makes it absolutely clear who he is in this passage as he is put under oath. So Jesus, under oath, declares himself to be God in the flesh. We're going to see the place, the procurement, the profession, and the pronouncement. Let's read this passage together. Matthew 26, we're going to be looking at verses 57 through 68. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. And Peter was following him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus that they might put him to death, but they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last two came forward and said, "This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days." And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?" But Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, "I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." And Jesus said unto him, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spit in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you?" I want you to see first the place in verses 57 and 58. They had gathered at the place of Caiaphas the high priest. Now, who does it say was there? That it was the scribes and the elders, and they had gathered there. That was the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, do you think the Pharisees and the Sadducees liked Jesus? Let me give you a few examples of what Jesus said about them. Matthew 23:13. "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, for you neither enter yourselves nor allow those who would enter to go in." Matthew 23:15. "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte, and when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourself." Matthew 23:16. "Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by the temple, it is nothing, but if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by the oath." He calls them blind guides that strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. He says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside you are full of greed and self-indulgence. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and uncleanness." Then he calls them serpents, a brood of vipers, and asks them, "How are you to escape being sentenced to hell?" Now, if somebody told you that, would you like them? Nope. But that's what Jesus had just said just a couple chapters before to the scribes and Pharisees sitting there in the temple. In that temple courtyard, Jesus was teaching in that Passion Week, and Jesus had just laid them really to waste. And they didn't like it. They already wanted him dead because people were following him instead of them. And now they had all the more reason to hate him wrongfully. He was telling the truth about them. Jesus told the truth and they didn't like it. They're waiting for him in this big house after he's arrested, and as he comes up, he's coming in the dark of night. Against the law that says that the trial would have to happen during the day, they have him in the dark of night. When people know that what they're doing is wrong, they try to cover it up. If somebody knows what they're doing is wrong, they try to cover it up. They try to make it like it's not a big deal. They try to make it like it's somebody else's fault. They knew that this trial was a farce, but yet they did it anyway. And so they did it at night so that the people would know. Have you ever heard that the cover-up is worse than the crime? Watergate, the cover-up was worse than the crime, wasn't it? I mean, the crime was pretty bad. We don't know how much Nixon knew about they were going to break in or not, but boy, he sure did try to cover it up for them. And he got in trouble. Bill Clinton's fiasco. The cover-up's what got him impeached and had him have that trial and caused him other issues because he had lied to the court about it. You remember Anthony Weiner? I mean, that guy, he tried to cover it all up too, and he gets in trouble with it. I mean, there's so much you can go on. I mean, in politics, you can see the cover-up that happens all the time. I think Anthony, or is it Andrew Cuomo? Andrew Cuomo, is that the governor of New York? What's his brother's name? Chris. Chris is his brother's name, right? All right, so Andrew Cuomo, he's in hot water now for two things. One, for the allegations that several women have made against him. And number two, for trying to cover up that they took people that they knew had COVID that were elderly, moved them out of the hospital and into nursing homes, and then found out that thousands of more people died than they ever reported from that move of moving people that they knew to have COVID into the nursing homes, and they tried to cover it over so that the federal government wouldn't find out about it. And so what is it now? Bigger things are happening, right? Because you try to cover it up. And the reason why the cover-up sometimes is worse than the crime is because the cover-up shows the guilt. Why else would you cover it up? You don't cover up something that you don't think is wrong. You don't cover up something if you've done it well or you've done something good. Here it was the priest that should be on trial, not Jesus. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, what are we trying to cover up in our lives? What do we try to gloss over? What do we try to make like it's okay? What do we rationalize to ourselves? Well, it's okay if I tell a lie here or there, because if I tell a lie here or there, it's just for my own benefit. Or what is it, if I cheat a little bit over here, if I cheat a little bit over there, if I lust a little bit over here, I lust a little bit over there, I get a little too prideful here, it's okay, I can smooth it all over, and if anybody catches me, I'll just turn it around and blame it on them. What are we covering up? Because we all have something. Because I look out, and I'm just checking to make sure. I'll look up even up there and about. I don't see any perfect people. None of us are perfect. Except for Martha. She is, I'm just kidding. Even Martha's not perfect. She's as close as anybody else in this room, but she's not perfect. I'm trying not to get in trouble myself. But it's true, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. We're all covering something up. There's always something, and we need to get it right with God. Because when we have to make excuses for ourselves, we have to start realizing that what we're doing is wrong. Don't try to hide it away in the night. Try to hide it away in the night the way that the Sanhedrin did. Instead, open it up, confess it to God, and get the relief of confessing to Him. Number two, I want you to see the procurement. In verses 59 through 62, now they try to get false testimony. They can't get anybody to tell the truth so that they can put Jesus in jail. So what do? They start getting people to tell lies. And person after person comes up and tells a lie, but the lie is so bad that they can't even use it. Now think about this. The judge is asking somebody to come and lie so that the defendant gets put to death. That's pretty bad. And that's what they're asking for. Not to put him on probation, not to give him a fine, not to throw him in prison, but to put him to death. And they can't find anybody that will tell them what they need to put him to death. So finally, something happens. They have two men who come forward, and they say this. This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. Now, is that what Jesus said? It wasn't what he said. John 2:19 through 21. Jesus answered them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The Jews then said, it's taken 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days. But Jesus was speaking about the temple of his body. That's what he said. Destroy this temple, and I'll raise it up in 3 days. And what did they do? They turned around and they said, Jesus said, they basically, you want to really take something out of context, try to make it. They said, yeah, he said he was going to blow the temple up. And they're like, is that really what he said? He did. He said, destroy this temple, and then I'll raise it back up in 3 days. But I'm going to destroy the temple. That's what he said. He said that I am able to destroy the temple of God, that I will destroy the temple. They asked Jesus if he has an answer. And he says nothing. Look, people will come out of the woodwork to say something to stop a good thing. People start saying untruthful things about you, it's because you're doing something right. It's because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. People will come out of that woodwork to say something to stop a good thing. And that's why we have to be blameless, as Jesus was. They came and they came and they came at him, false witness after false witness after false witness, and none of it would stick. I want you to see number 3, the profession in verses 63 through 64. Caiaphas then puts Jesus under an oath, and he says, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus finally answers. After all the lies told against him over and over, he finally answers. And he says, tell us if you're the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus says, you have said so. He affirmed what he said. He said, as we would say, I heard that. You ever heard anybody say that? I heard that. I'm going to go to Bojangles. I heard that. It's always food. I heard that. I heard that. People say, it's like, you said it. You said it, brother. You got it. That's what Jesus said. He says, tell us, are you the Christ? And he goes, you said it. And he goes, and from now on you'll see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. They knew what that meant. They knew what that meant because these people in the Sanhedrin, they would have known when he says the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven, that he was talking about the Son of Man, the messianic term from the book of Daniel, seated at the right hand of power, that he would be equal with God, coming on the clouds of heaven, as it says in Daniel 7:13 and 14. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. The Sanhedrin were sitting as a judge of the one who would one day be their judge. Do you believe what Jesus said? You must if you're going to believe. If you're going to call yourself a Christian, you have to believe what he said when he said he is the Christ, the Son of God, that he is the Son of Man, that he is the one who will come on the clouds of heaven, and that he will rule and reign forever. He is the Messiah. He came to set all things right, and he'll set things right in your life if you'll turn from your sin and trust in him. Finally, I want you to see the pronouncement in verses 65 through 68. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, he has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You have now heard his blasphemy. He was tearing his robe. It's a sign of grief, a sign of anger. I think he was probably more in anger. Y'all remember Hulk Hogan in the 80s? Oh, yeah. No, sorry, that's Macho Man Randy Savage. But what was it that Hulk said? He says, you know, what you going to do when Hulkamania runs all over you? And then he wore the yellow shirt with the red writing on it, and he would go like this, and he would rip his shirt off every time he'd go in to wrestle. Remember that? I kind of say, you know, he did that like he was angry and to show how strong he was. And what here does he do? This isn't like David, who has heard of a horrible thing that's happened and he tears his robe in grief. This was the high priest tearing his thing and saying, oh, we got him now. He has uttered blasphemy. He has equated himself with God. And so now we're going to get to kill him. And so he rips his robe and he's there. He puts on that show of how angry he is. But I'll say this to the charge of blasphemy. It's not blasphemy if it's true. Jesus didn't speak ill of God. Jesus didn't do anything but tell the truth, that he is the Son of God, that he is equal with God, that he sits at the right hand of the Father, and that Jesus is a person of the Trinity, the one true God. They sentenced him to death. It was an unlawful sentence from an unlawful court at an unlawful time. And then they spit in his face, and they hit him, and they slapped him. And they said, "Prophesy to us, you Christ, who struck you?" They're beating him. Maybe getting behind him. Maybe covered his eyes. It's in the dark. Maybe they cut the lights off and they start beating on him. And they say, "Oh, if you're the Christ, tell us which one of us is hitting you." Mocking him. They spit on the one who came to save them. They struck the one who came to save them. They slapped the one who came to save him. They mocked the one who came to save him. And I'll ask you this question. I want you to put yourself in the position of the judge. Who do you believe? What is your judgment? Is your judgment that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, that he is the one who will come on the clouds of heaven, that he is the one who will come as the Messiah and set all things right again? Or do you think that it's blasphemy? You have to judge that. Will you follow Jesus or will you spurn him? And the difference between that is following him is the pathway to heaven, and spurning him is the pathway to hell. So will you continue in your sin? Will you continue to rebel against God? Or will you come to faith in him? Will you believe that he is who he said he is? Because that's the question, the answer of which is the most important answer of anything in your life. Let's bow our heads together.